Okay, welcome back. So I already went and saved my Photoshop file. I can say file, save as, and save it at the location that you want, and then just click save. It's gonna be a PSD, has to be a Photoshop file. And since I already did it, I'm just gonna go ahead and open my After Effects. And this is how you're gonna bring your clean plates inside of After Effects. So let's just give it a little bit of a minute so this thing starts up. So I'm just gonna close this up. Okay, so here on the side, I already have my folder open where I have my Photoshop. So I'm just gonna click on the Photoshop file and just click and drag it into my project manager. And notice that I think by default it comes like this, footage, and it's gonna tell you like what do you want to do. You want to merge the layers or choose a layer. In reality, we want to still keep our layers separate. So let's go into composition, retain layer size, and then editable layers styles. Since we don't want to merge our layers, we already went through the process of separating. So we definitely don't want to merge them back into one image. So try to keep it into editable layer styles, and we're going to say OK. So now what is going to happen? It's going to create a pre-compose for me in a folder. Inside of the folder, we can see that we have all the layers that were inside of my Photoshop project, including the ones that are even not visible. So in case that you want to keep it a little bit more clean up, remember just to delete whatever you're not using, and it will bring the exact layers. In this case, it's not a big deal. We can always do it here. Like if I go inside of the pre-comp, inside of my pre-comp is already the same setup that I have here. If you notice, it's my main element, my foreground rock. It's gonna be the same order. My main element is the first layer, and then my foreground rock, then my midground, and so on. Um, so in this case, I don't want to see these two layers, and I'm not gonna be using it. So I'm just selecting, click on one, and then shift click on the other one, and just click delete on your keyboard. So now it just let me stick with this stuff that I just want, my main element, my foreground, my midground, and other stuff. I'm gonna just rearrange here. My foreground element should be in the front, so I'm gonna just put it on the top just as a reference and try to keep it organized and stuff. So next thing that we need to do for creating the 2.5D, we need to create our layers, convert our layers into a 3D space. So in order to do that, I'm going to select all my layers. Remember, click on the first one and then just hold shift and left click on the last one. So it's going to select all your layers. And here, notice if I hover my mouse on top of this, it says 3D layer. Allow this layer to be manipulated in 3 dimensions. So if I go and click on the checkboxes under this option, notice that now I have my 3D layers converted. So, and here it's giving me the handles. It's giving me my y-axis, my x-axis, and this one here is our z-axis. But right now it's kind of like this shape. It doesn't look like an arrow because it's facing the camera, so we're seeing the front of the arrow. So this is good. So we're gonna go and create our camera because we also need a camera in order to navigate around our 3D space. So it's two options to do your camera. You can kind of like go here and do right click on it, go into new, and then camera here. Or you can go into layer here on the top, layer, new, camera. Or you can do this long shortcut if you want. So I'm gonna click on the camera. So I'm creating the camera, and I'm gonna try to keep it. Usually it comes as a default, I think, as a 2-node camera. I'm just gonna go into the one node camera since it's a simple one, and I'm gonna keep my default settings on it since we don't have any information. In certain cases, if you have your information, how far your object was, the angle, and all the stuff, you can come here and just manually set it up. But at this point, we don't have any information of the camera. You can rename your cameras if you want here too. I'm just gonna keep everything on the default for now. So I'm gonna click OK. Now we have our camera and we have our layers set up in the 3D space. But in this case, I cannot see my 3D space. And that's because I haven't actually set up my viewer to start seeing our 3D space. So in order to set up our viewer to start seeing our 3D space, you have to go here where it says one view. There's a select view layout. I'm going to select this one to two views horizontal. You can set up vertical, 4 views, whatever you feel like that. But for example, I'm going to use just right now the 2 views horizontal. So now, give us this. This is a top view. Also, this is our active camera. This is the camera that we just created and is what it's seeing. If I select my camera, I just hold down the space bar and just left click and drag it. You will see that this is our camera and this is what it's seeing. Everything looks in the same plane right now. So the other thing that I want to point out when we're doing our 3D space is notice these little triangles on the corners. That means that this is your the area where you're working on. If I go and click on my active camera, look how those triangles move to this one. That's just an indication for you in which view you're working on. Okay, so now so this is our camera and this is our layers. One of the things that I like to do just to also keep it organized, I like to color code my layers. In order to color code my layers, I'm going to go into this little square that is next to the number of the layer. I'm going to click on it, and I'm just going to choose colors that are kind of bright and they're easy to see, like yellow, for example. I'm going to go into my main element. I don't know, I'm going to do some green. Then probably I'll do some purple. And the last one, probably I will do it red. So this way, it will be easy for me and for you guys when you start manipulating your layers into 3D space to move them around. For example, right now I'm having selected the background. Remember that the background is going to be the one that's going to be farther away from the camera. And if we're watching from the top, and if I select the camera is here. So if we're watching from the top view, basically my background, I will need to push it up in this case, or like further away from the camera. So my camera is there, so I need to push it further away from my camera. I'm going to hover on top. Let me actually do this. This is a little bit better to see. So I'm going to hover on top of my arrow, where is my C depth. This is my C depth, my blue arrow. I'm going to try to kind of like push it up. When I hover up, it's just click and left click and drag, and you will be able to move it around as you want. And you notice how my active camera, if I push it closer to the camera, pretty much I lost my giraffe and my background and everything. So definitely you want to push it more into the background. And notice that we start getting this empty spaces here on our active camera. We don't want that because that's transparency. If I go here and I click on it, you can, this by the way is the transparency indication. You can toggle it on and off. This is easier for you to see if something is being transparent or it's actually for real black. So if you toggle it on and off, you can see that stuff. So our transparency start building up here when we push the layer to the back, to the C depth far away from the camera. So what I want to do, I want to scale up this layer. In order to scale it up, remember we have to go into the options here, transform, and then we will choose scale. Now notice that my position, my scale, and my orientation got a third number. This is because the third number is represent the C depth. Remember, the first number is X, then Y, and then the C depth. So in this case, our scale is completely related. That means there's a link here. When you have this icon toggle on and on, it means that if you modify any of these values, it's going to scale globally. So, and that's what pretty much we want. But sometimes probably you want to just scale, I don't know, probably on the X-axis or the Y. So you can go ahead and just turn it on and off, depending what you need. So, but in this case, I'm going to leave it link. Since right now I want to keep this related. So I'm going to start just putting different numbers here. The goal is to pretty much cover up this area, but I don't want to go too over with that number. So I'm going to click here. I don't know. I'm going to just put 125 and see how far it takes me. So that was a little bit too far. You just notice it went already out of frame. So I'm going to go 123. That's a little bit better. It's closer. Of course, yours probably not going to be the same as my numbers because it's depending how much you ended up pushing it, the layer. Probably yours is going to be ended up like being 115 or 130. I don't know. It's going to vary it. So just bear in mind that number is going to be completely different. So now I want to grab my midground, and I'm going to pretty much do the same thing. I'm going to get the options for my layer. I'm going to go into the transform. And first of all, I'm going to push it back. So I'm going to grab it from the Z axis, push it backwards. And notice that this is going to start creating problems. Like here, I can see like bubble rocks because this one, remember, is from our clean plate from the background. And pretty much I don't want that either because it's going to pretty much look kind of weird when we start doing our movement. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to scale it up. And again, these numbers can be probably different than mine. Just input different numbers right now. That was too much. That was too little. So it's probably like in between. Oh, yeah. That probably, it was extremely too much. So there you go. Remember, the goal is just to fill out those spaces. Now, my main element, I'm probably going to leave it on the same place where it is, so I'm not going to modify her. The other thing is going to be my foreground. Remember, the foreground has to be closer to the camera in order to create that parallax effect. So I'm going to pretty much start bringing it down in this case because my camera is here. So my foreground should be closer. And as you can see, start kind of like scaling up too. And here I'm going to do the same thing. I'm pretty much going to bring the scale down in this case. It's not going to be a scale up. Also, another shortcut that you can do in order to not be clicking on the options and then transform and then trying to find out the scale, you can also click S in your keyboard. And it's going to bring you just that value for the scale. So I'm going to probably, that was too little. Okay, so let's say that one is probably closer. Probably can be just one more number. Oh, but yeah. I'm going to leave it at 90 there. Notice also that my giraffe kind of started looking odd. We ended up killing her legs. So one of the easy fixes that we can do probably is just grabbing our main element and just bring it down in the Y-axis, just a little bit, just to cover it. And I'll probably like bring it a little bit more down. And notice that that's why it's important to do our clean place and that our clean place looks good, because sometimes you will need to do this kind of stuff after you start arranging your layers. bring some elements to the side or down or vice versa. So you need to get this stuff going into certain direction, and this will give you the freedom with a clean plate. So after I do this, I already have like certain amount of depth, so that's pretty good. We already built our depth. But now we need to start animating our camera. In order to animate our camera, if you go into the options, we will have also transform options here. And here, we can start creating keyframes. Remember, everything that has this stopwatch in After Effects, if it's an effect or if it's a layer or anything, you can start creating keyframes when you click on it. So if I go and click on this stopwatch, notice how it's becoming kind of like light blue, and it's giving me also a key here and a representation of key on the timeline. So the next thing, I will suggest to just keep it no more than 3 keyframes, because it can get a little bit tricky, and navigating in After Effects 3D space is not exactly too graceful as it is on Maya or other softwares that are dedicated for 3D. So I'm going to go into the last frame. I think probably this is too much. This is like 2,000 frames. It's going to take too long. I'm going to readjust the size of my timeline. In order to do that, I'm going to click Control K. And here, this is the composition settings. And you can set up your duration frame. So in this case, I'm just going to go into 100. Since I don't want this to be too far away, you can probably go and change it. And you can also change here the frame rate if you want to go in different frame rate. You should try to keep it 24 probably. That'll be a good option. Yeah, and that I'm just going to keep all this stuff normal. So I'm going to say OK. And notice that now my timeline got reduced to 100 frames. So that's pretty good. So going back to the timeline, I ended up pushing my time slider all the way to the end of the time slider of the timeline. And I'm gonna grab my camera. And again, what I did with my layers, I'm gonna push the camera in, or in this case closer to the layers. So I'm gonna grab my Z-axis. Just gonna start pushing in, and probably I'm gonna do a small move to the side, in this case on the X, if I can grab it. So also remember to zoom in and out into this. Is also just your middle mouse, just scroll in it. So, and I'm also probably gonna do a little bit of rotation. So remember, I need to actually go and lock the rotation here too. Do a keyframe on the first frame, and then go all the way to the end. I'm gonna grab X, Y. Okay, I can grab this tool here, the rotation tool. I'm gonna go and hover it like on top of my Y, and just click and drag it. Just be gentle with it because it kind of doesn't. It goes a little bit too much. Yeah, that was too much. I'm just going to do it by numbers. So if I want to modify the Y-axis, I'm going to go, remember the first number is X, the second number is the Y. So I'm probably going to just modify it from there. And because I have to be really gentle with this. So I'm probably just going to go in just to 1 degree. And then notice like how after kind of like rotating my camera, I start creating also transparency. I'm just going to push my camera back to probably a little bit to that side. And I don't know. Let's see. Just want a little bit of movement. Remember to keep it subtle. It doesn't have to be too crazy, because if you start doing it too crazy, it's just going to start looking a little bit too overwhelming. So let's actually see how it looks. I'm going to go back into my regular view. In order to go back into my regular view, just I say one view. And I'm going to maximize this and run preview. So yeah, look how the rocks start feeling like they're coming closer to the camera a little bit better than everything else on the shot is moving a little bit slower as it's getting deeper on the camera. The giraffe also, like you can see the movement on the giraffe, like around here on her legs, and also how it's actually revealing the fence on the background, and a little bit of the trees. So that's pretty good actually. Um, so now let's actually add a small movement on my main element, in this case my giraffe. In order to do that, we will go and use our puppet tool. So I'm gonna just enter this. And here's where our puppet tool is. Or you can do Control P, and that's gonna be the shortcut for it. So make sure to have selected the layer that you want to be working on it. And remember, the puppet tool is just gonna create points for moving your layer. So in this case, for example, I want to move the head of the giraffe. I'm gonna create a point there. I want to keep one in the middle of the neck and one on the beginning of the neck too. I might probably add one on the torso, one on the belly, and one on this part of the leg too. And probably I will be ended up putting points on each of the knees as well as the end of the legs. These ones, the last ones that I'm putting here in the end of the legs, is just to hold down those ones, because if I start moving this, the chances of this pulling out this section of the layer is gonna be more higher. So it's always important to just put points on the areas where you don't want to be modified too. So in this case, notice that I also get an extra thing here on my options on the layer. So that's the fix. If you expand that, like for example, you have it like here and you start expanding the puppet tool, you go into the mesh and you go into the form, you see all the pins that we just add. And if you go one by one, it's going to tell you, like for example, if I click on the 12, that's going to move here. And notice how the points also, instead of looking just this circle with an empty in the middle, they get filled out. That's an indication for you to know that that's the point that you're selecting. And if I start switching, see how it actually starts changing. So with that being said too, you can also go here, and I will suggest just selecting all of them and expand them. See how they already start creating keyframes. So in this case, for example, I'm just gonna make my viewer a little bit bigger so we can see all the points. I don't want this to be all the way at the end. For example, I want the giraffe to be at the beginning of the footage being in this position. So I can just go and select all these points, left click and drag them to the beginning of the timeline. So now I will need to put my times indicator all the way into my or the end of my timeline slider. And here is where I can start doing my modifications. Remember, you have to go back into your tool. Like in this case, I'm still in the puppet tool. You can see it because it has the little pin there. So switching into my regular selection tool, it's going to be on here, or B as a Victor in your keyboard. So now I can start grabbing points. Like if I grab this point and pull it down, I can start creating that little animation of my giraffe. So remember to just keep it subtle. We don't want it to be like too crazy. So I'm just going to add small movements. And remember, this is going to be applying some of the principles of animation also. Everything in animation has to move. So if it's just slight movement, just to convey this alive, that will be good. In this case, I'm not going to move the ones on the bottom since those ones are locking my legs. So, but everything else should be moving. So in this case, I'm going to do a RAM preview for this. Or giraffe, start getting that movement. It's so subtle, but it brings a little bit of life to the picture. And obviously here you can start adding more stuff if by any chance you want to have like some movement on the trees. You can do that, but remember you will need to roll them separately or like go into Photoshop and do whatever we did on the previous tutorial in order to separate it. So, but yeah. So cool. This is a 2.5D. The other tutorial is going to be an extra, and I'm going to teach you how to create clean plates inside of After Effects in case that for some reason you cannot access into Photoshop. It's also a way to do clean plates here. So I'm going to show you that in the next tutorial.